This is your guest host, Sergey Ross, and you are listening to Product Innovation Show. Every week, our guests come and share their stories and wisdom how to ship a great product. And today I'm here with Aggelos Mouzakitis. He's a growth product manager at Growth Sandwich, which is an agency, not a restaurant, which you might have thought. He knows a lot about customer research and delivers insights that can help you build a better product, and that's why he's here today. Aggelos, awesome to have you here. Welcome.
Awesome to be here. I appreciate that you managed to pronounce my surname. And let's geek out about product.
Well, before we do that, why is your agency called a sandwich? Why there's a sandwich in the name?
I'll be honest with you. There's no backstory. It was a good.com. It was a catchy name. Back then, all the domain names that had the growth in front were considered to be cool, and I'm very bored of rebranding.
Okay. No, I feel you. Okay, so that's good. That makes sense. You are a big advocate of customer-led growth, and companies hire you as someone who specifically helps them in this area. So what exactly is customer-led growth? Like, how does it differ from other models?
Customer-led growth basically leverages mainly qualitative research to help a company drive product and growth decisions. Now, how does it differ? When it comes to sales-led growth or marketing-led approach or the product-led growth, these three main approaches have basic differences. When it comes to customer-led growth, it's the lead that confuses us and make us think that it's a fourth one. In fact, even if you are sales-led, marketing-led, or product-led, you need to leverage qualitative research in order to take product and growth decisions. The difference is that
Absolutely.
Qualitative research becomes the center of what you do. That's the difference. Because we believe that through the customer, through the deepest fears, incentives, motivations of the customer, we can build an insanely good product. We put it at the center of the decision-making process.
So it's similar in some ways to product-led on a very high level, but it's different.
On a very high level, it's extremely complementary to product-led growth. Product-led cannot survive without a strong customer-led approach, but I would say that customer-led also fits perfectly with a sales-led approach and with a marketing-led approach. In fact, a very good way to be customer-led is to switch back to being sales-led for a little bit. Why? Because you have salespeople, so you have an extra human interaction, which is a great opportunity to do qualitative research. So the more you interact with the customer on a human level, the more opportunities you have to do qualitative research, and the better you can actually become product-led afterwards.
Totally. So it sounds like customer-led model is there. This element exists in sales-led, of course, and in product-led, because you can't build a product with a customer. But is the main difference between customer-led and product-led, for example, or sales-led, is the degree of how much you look at the customer data, or is there some other difference? The big one.
You're not just looking at the customer data, you are doing advanced qualitative research, which isn't something that happens in every product-led business out there. Not every product-led business has an internal user research team that drives product and growth decisions. Of course, product-led teams have a UX at their core, so by definition, they're more research-driven, but that doesn't mean that they put it at the center of every decision that they're taking when it comes to both growth and product. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, totally. No, that totally makes sense. So it's you're like laser focused specifically on the customer. How deep do you go into the customer research, like qualitative wise? Like, what do you do there?
That's where the difference is mainly highlighted, because when it comes to customer-led growth, we go very deep. We are almost performing some sort of psychotherapeutic user interview. That after it, the user has revealed things that in any other circumstance they wouldn't reveal. So it's a different way of taking the customer request. It's not just asking what is it that you want us to build. We go deep into the problems, into what keeps them where they are, what motivates them to switch, what motivates them to change the way that they're doing things, into their daily lives, into fears, into motivations, into a lot of details, insane, ridiculous details that you know what, if you speak with a customer-led company, you can understand and you can empathize with how different they speak about their customer, for example, because they give you a ridiculous details about their customers. They know stuff that you couldn't even imagine that they could know. So, for example, they could tell you that our customer is between this age and that age, works in agencies, let's say. Geographically speaking, they are placed in Europe. They work in their company for 2 years at least. They are not VP level, but not even a manager level, because managers are very close to the product and they don't have decision-making power. VPs are far from the product and they do have decision-making power, but they don't understand the problem. So we need someone in the middle. So most probably the title that comes with them is that. And they need to have a promotion within the company in the last 3 years. And before that, they had a marketing background. And here are 3 qualifiers to use during the conversation to be 100% sure that they're your ideal customer profile. So things happen in a crazy detail.
Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah, no, that's honestly, I would love to hear one of those interviews, because it sounds like job to be done on steroids, plus a lot of other stuff on top of that. It's
exactly that, exactly as you said. It's very jobs to be done driven, very jobs to be done inspired. I'm not, while I am jobs to be done advocate, I don't think it's the only way to do things, and I don't think it's the following the jobs to be done timeline and the jobs to be done forces is like a rule, a law that we have to use. But speaking about the problem on an outcome-driven manner, trying to understand what the customer wants to achieve and why, and a lot of whys after that, is necessary in order to be considered product-led, customer-led.
I was doing a product. It was like a product app interview, and I was considered a customer, and it was about crypto investment. And when they asked me a lot of questions and they went deeper and deeper, they're like, why do you invest? And I'm like, at some point, I was like, I don't even know. I never thought of that. I'm like, I invested, it makes sense. But then they're asking, so what was the emotional component in it? I'm like, I need to think about it. I don't have a clear answer. So it's tough to really understand what the customers are trying to do. I don't know what it was trying to do.
In this specific example, this question would indeed be difficult, because a better question would be, what is it that you're trying to achieve by investing? And that would create a good basis for a conversation around what happens in your psychology behind investing. But if I just ask you, why do you invest? Yes, sometimes you're just stuck. You don't know. Because what? Because I want to feel successful.
Well, make more money. Make more money. I mean, that's pretty standard.
Yes, but this is a functional thing. This is a functional outcome. In most cases, we have both functional and emotional outcomes and social outcomes. So reality would be, because I want to make more money, because I want to be perceived as more successful, and because I want to be perceived as more attractive. For example, I'm just saying now. So
of course.
If you only stick to the functional outcomes, then you're missing a lot of the bigger picture, and therefore that doesn't help you, first, create the perfect product, and second, communicate it in a perfect way.
No, absolutely. No, that is true, because you actually take the actual customer words and put them into the copy, put them into the description, so they're like, oh yeah, this is exactly what I'm looking for.
Exactly.
Aggelos, why you're not a fan of product-led model in simple terms? What's something that you I'm not going to say hate about it, but kind of.
I was a big fan of the product-led approach, and I still am. But I'm a fan of the main idea that comes with it. That the product experience is a very important thing. Now, the product-led growth community, generally speaking, follows the same path as growth hacking at the moment, in my view, which means that it tends to become a buzzword. Everybody wants it. Few people really know what it is. So you see lots of investors.
That sounds like buzzword.
Exactly. Lots of companies want to be product-led, but they're not ready to be product-led. But they want to be product-led. Why? Because it's not... they should be product-led. Otherwise, they're not cool. Otherwise, their investors will not perceive them as good, as cool companies. So you see businesses that haven't figured other basic things, that they cannot really detach themselves from a sales-led approach. And in fact, they shouldn't, because business goes perfectly on a sales-led manner, and they want to be product-led. And I work with some of them. I used to work with some of them. And when I tell them
right.
that, you know what, you're not ready to be product-led. If you get product-led, I can make you product-led tomorrow if you want, but this will backfire probably on your short-term revenue. So I won't do it. Find someone else to do it for you. So that's why
because you make the switch. You make the switch from sales to product, then you're not gonna get you're gonna have a dip, which is probably gonna be a little bit deeper and longer than what you expected.
Exactly. That's the first thing. Another important thing is that people, when they want to be product-led, they don't realize what will happen in the conversion rates of their funnel. They don't realize that being product-led means that you are going to drop a lot of money on the top of the funnel, because all of your mid-funnel conversion rates will get minimal. Will go from 15 or 20% to 2%. So they don't get that before doing the switch. And the third reason that I tend not to be a big fan of the community these days is because I think that, generally speaking, especially during the COVID pandemic, we are seeking for the human factor more in our lives. So it's unfortunate that this product-led growth trend has exploded a little bit before a pandemic that kept all individuals into their homes seeking for the human touch. So I think that we cannot eradicate the human factor from any value proposition out there. The human factor has a position, and being product-led isn't a silver bullet for everything.
Yeah, I mean, I think like if you have all those apps like Uber or smaller apps, in a sense that when you want to ask somebody a question, they always walk you through screens. You cannot ever chat to a real person. That is such an experience that removes you from, like, it doesn't allow you to touch the company in a way. Like, it always, like, you can't talk to a person. There's no phone number. There's no email. There's nothing. And there are quite a lot of apps like that. And it's a pretty not great experience. Like, well, you could submit a ticket. Maybe we'll reach out to you if we feel like it.
Exactly. And some people perceive that as product-led. You can have a demo, have the human factor giving empathy to the people at the times that the person needs empathy, and still be product-led. So it's not always about transforming ourselves into being product-led. It might be into optimizing ourselves into being product-led, optimizing certain things that can be optimized, that can be product-led, and keeping the human factor either untouched or just increasing the capacity of our human factor through a product-led approach. That wouldn't be a transformation, that would be an optimization. And check out Intercom. So remember Intercom's free trial doesn't exist anymore. Intercom now gives demos. The product-led company, Intercom, doesn't let you experience a product before you speak with someone. Isn't that ironic?
It is. It is. Well, but they understand. I think they understand that, like what you said, is that it's not just one. It's not there's like product led and that's it. Like we are. This is our religion. Like they understand that. Look, there's other things, and the hybrid is much stronger and better way forward.
Exactly. Intercom gets it. Pando gets it, which is like one of the biggest advocates of product led. And you need to get a demo, and then they offer you like a year plan. Not even a month-by-month subscription. Product-led, free trials, freemiums, those are insane things. But the core value behind them is that give value to people before they make their decision. That's the let them see. Show, don't tell. That's the principle. But that doesn't mean we need to make everything show, don't tell. Otherwise, they won't work. That's a limiting belief of our community at the moment, I think.
100%. And I would say in pretty much any area, whether it's finance, whether it's product or sales, when anybody has a polarizing opinion, like only do this, it's like black and white, and they're super aggressive, usually that is a red flag. And from my experience, what I found, especially in crypto, if somebody says, this is it, that's the only way to do it, that's everything else is awful, or everything else just doesn't make sense. Whenever those polarizing opinions show up, it's usually, well, first, it's not true, it's not accurate, but it also shows that the person is over investing, and they probably have a certain belief that is not correct, because every single decision is in balance. They all have a certain pro and con, and that's when somebody says no, the one way, that's almost never works like that.
And just to connect what you just said, which was very, very helpful to research, these people also choose the part of the narrative that fits their opinion. And us, as product managers, when we do that, this is called confirmation bias and researcher's bias. So sometimes we do that as product managers. We might consider a feature very good, or as founders as well. And we might ask questions like, do you like this feature? And expecting from people to tell us what? That no, your feature sucks. I hate it. I will never use it. No, of course they won't do it. They will never do it in the UK. They will never do it in Canada. They might do it in Greece or in Germany. People are more straightforward there. But still, we will be too shy to tell you that we hate your new feature. So this is a bias question from the beginning.
It's a beautifully led question that is 99% of the time will deliver what you want to hear.
Exactly.
And that's probably the reason they ask it, but it's like, okay, well, it's more of a check mark. Did we ask it? Yes, we did. So let's proceed.
Exactly. And you know what is very common at the moment is that you ask people, how much time do you spend with your customers, talking to your customers? And they tell you a lot. And don't get me wrong, I'm happy when I hear companies speaking with their customers. I'm happy by principle. But then when I see questions like that, I know that this creates trash in, trash out. Because if I base my decision making on a question, do you like our product or do you like this feature? And 80% of the people tell me, yes, we like it. And then I go to the next question. Then it's very easy for me to launch something, to spend 6 months on building something, 3 months on building something, consider the engineering and product resources that are needed to build a complex integration, for example. It's insane. And for a seed-level company or even an A-series company, and then on top of them, the marketing cost to promote it, if this gets wrong and then I need to revert it, the cost is so high that it can be as high as the life of my company at this stage. So people don't realize that, and I don't want to create fear in the audience, but this is true. Such a little question repetitively can lead you to a mistake that can lead to your death, like your company's death, period. It's that simple.
It's true, because it's these little things that really make a big difference, especially once you start coding and you already promised your VCs or angels or whoever invested in you. It's just that train is difficult to stop, and then it becomes Theranos. Hopefully it doesn't.
Exactly.
Well, how do you rephrase that, Aggelos? Like, so let's say, we would just take that question, like, do you like this feature? How would you rephrase that?
At first, I wouldn't ask
or a better
about...
way to say it.
At least, give me a little bit more context. Have I launched the feature, or am I doing research to see if they want me to build the feature that I already have in my backlog? What happens?
Yeah, it's the second. It's the second. You're still doing research.
Okay. Then I would try to ask associated questions without saying about the feature, such as what are the top challenges that you are facing at the moment when it comes to, and then I mentioned the vertical that I'm in. They tell you it's this, that, and this, and then you say, oh, you mentioned this, can you tell me a little bit more about that? So by associated questions, you go towards this little thing that your new feature is planning to do without mentioning the feature at all. The user shouldn't know that is being interviewed about a new feature. The user needs to know that we are speaking about a problem, that there is no structure in the conversation. It's a very chill conversation that doesn't have a structure, and that we're talking about a specific problem. And then when we reach this problem that is connected to this new feature, we start asking more questions. Tell me more about it. This is a good question, actually. Tell me more about it. What do you mean by that?
Anything unstructured, open.
Agexactly. Open-ended questions. What do you mean by that? Why are you saying this? 5 minutes ago, you mentioned
it's
this.
like a therapy, Aggelos. It's like a therapy.
Exactly.
Right? Like when you go to your therapist, like, so what do you think about that? So you have nightmares. So it's super open-ended, short questions and free-flowing, and then they pick something.
Exactly.
They in their own words, repeat it back to you, and then you go deeper, and like, okay, now I feel much calmer.
Exactly. These are the techniques of paraphrasing and reflection, which are massively used in psychotherapy, and are part of the trans-theoretical model of psychotherapy. And I'm studying that, by the way.
Right. I love it too.
And also part of the trans-theoretical model, if you see the stages of decision making of the trans-theoretical model, which is basically how we decide about doing a change in our life, it's almost identical with the jobs to be done timeline. And when you see the forces, the jobs to be done forces, are almost identical with the trans-theoretical model forces. So there is a specific way that people are thinking. So if you ask them biased questions, you will get biased answers. You need to know how to ask them questions in order to get the right answers and lead by not leading the conversation. Be the leader of that by not getting the answer that you want.
Totally. I wanted to ask you, I'm curious what you're going to say. Steve Jobs, I know whenever Steve Jobs' name is mentioned, especially in the product community, there's a massive amount of skepticism. Everybody's like kind of already giggling, like, oh my God, here it goes again. We're going to talk about his genius. No, but what I wanted to say was his principle or his belief was like, look, customers don't know what they want, and we don't do user research. There's a little bit of a myth in there somewhere. What is your take on this whole thing? How do you think about that?
Oh, I definitely agree that users don't know what they want. And in fact, I have built a canvas. It's called the value gap canvas. And this is basically illustrates the gap between the perception of value that the user come into your product to get and the actual value that you are delivering. And if you see on the left side of the canvas, I have something written there that says biases from the past. And what does that mean specifically is that the perception of value that users expect is always biased from what they have seen already in their lives, from what they have experienced in competitor products. So if we would strictly ask customers, what do they want us to build? we would have some sort of oligopoly where every solution would be almost the same. And I know that for a fact, because last time that I worked, for example, with a video conferencing solution, 80% of their product roadmap was features that Zoom had. Should they have built them? Not at all, because they didn't have the resources, the strategic mindset, or the power to go head to head on a feature level with Zoom. They should have differentiated themselves, and that's what they did. So it proved that 85%, 80% of the roadmap, which was customer driven, because they were asking the customers, was wrong. Here it is. What do you think about it? And this company was customer driven. They were asking the customers what they wanted, right?
But it's clever because if you look at what they did internally, it sounds like they are customer driven. But if you maybe look at it from the outside, it looks they are competitor driven because they're copying Zoom. But back to your point, it's that the customers are going to look at Zoom because they've never seen anything else. So like, how could they imagine, instead of a phone with a keyboard, physical keyboard, a touch phone that actually works well? They can't imagine that. There's no way. They would like to have some kind of that, some gadget that actually does these things, but they have never even thought of because they never experienced any of that.
Exactly. It doesn't exist. And to go back to your point about Steve Jobs, I don't believe that they weren't doing research. I just think that what he wanted to illustrate is that we are not building what users ask us to build. They were doing some research, focusing on the emotional parts. They perhaps were doing other sort of research, behavioral research, and that they were coming up with the solutions based on the research. And this is pretty much what we have to do. Us as product managers, we're not here to build what customers tell us. We are here to decide what we're going to build. Customers are the worst to tell us what we should build. Customers, on the other hand, are great to tell us about their problems. And then we need to figure out how we are going to solve their problems. If we build what customers tell us, then we restrict innovation. And that's what Steve Jobs perhaps wanted to say, that, you know what, we innovate because we are visionaries and we are not really restricting our imagination based on what people think that they want. In fact, it's impossible that they wouldn't have any sort of research. They tested their products, but probably that's what he meant.
100%. Yeah, no, it's also like, if you look at even Apple's recent computers with M1, their new Apple CPU, the early models didn't really have that much power, but the efficiency that you see, and when you experience that unbelievable efficiency where you do all the heavy load tasks on your computer and it's at 35 degrees and the fans actually they're not even spinning. That is something that, as Apple user, for example, for me for the last 12 years, I've never ever seen before. I didn't even know that was possible, because we are using this Intel machines that are loud, they're baking hot all the time. And now I have a reference point. Now we could have a conversation, but before I would have never even imagined that. It's just difficult because I've never seen that before in any computer because it never existed. Exactly.
That's a very good example. And just to add up on that again, you mentioned again the functional part. Any Apple product has, and that's what we call branding. It also has the emotional jobs that is doing in the same time for the users. And sometimes these are more important. Sometimes, only sometimes. When it comes to hardware, unfortunately, the emotional part complements the functional. If you don't have the functional, the emotional will collapse at some point. You build the emotional by establishing the functional first. And that's what Apple has done. They were building very good computers and electronics for quite some time. And at some point, they focused on building the emotional part and be the number one brand of electronics in the world. And they did it. And they were doing that for plenty of years. They focused on building the best computers for more than a decade or 2 decades. And then they switched into the emotional part.
Yeah, because And then I think that's what a lot of critics don't really get, or they totally miss, is that they talk about high prices and they call Apple fans sheeps and all of those names. But the truth is that this whole model, Apple model, would not work if there were no fundamental reasons for their superiority, and they are. If you actually look at the hardware, if you take it apart, if you look at the microscope, if you x-ray it, the technology, the actual technology they have, it is phenomenal. It is really state of the art. And yes, you could have all the ads and everything, but there is a solid reason for people to go with it. Well, much more than just the logo and the color. Of course, Apple will over-index on that because they have all this, call it retail, not retail investors, but normal people who would buy iPhones, and it's a high-margin product. That's more of a business decision, but the fundamentals are always have been there.
Exactly.
What do you think, Aggelos? What are your thoughts on what could product managers, or what do they need to get better at right now if they are working in, let's say, a mid-size B2B tech company or B2C tech company? What could they be doing to get better at building products, talking to customers? What are some of the practices they should consider? Maybe that's something they're not doing right now.
What they definitely are not doing is they don't talk with their customers enough. And the second thing that they're not doing is that they're not leveraging internal human resources that are talking to customers anyway, to use them as mini researchers, to transform them into mini researchers. And that's one of the best and most scalable tactics that product managers can use if they don't have enough time. They can use existing touch points with the customer, either physical touch points or digital touch points, to do some research. And these are the moment that we are selling and the moment that user churns. We have, at this point, we have either a salesperson, an onboarding, a cancellation survey, or even a customer success person speaking with the user that is planning to churn or has just churned. So we have both the human interaction and some capacity from the user to answer us a question. And these are amazing opportunities to do research that is consistent and on a weekly basis, and not just ad hoc user interviews or an ad hoc survey that product managers are doing every time that they remember that they have neglected this task, or every time that they just need it. It's better to have some consistent research taking place. So this is something that I would definitely advise them to do. And when it comes to actually speaking with customers, look, I don't want to make this like super hard so that I am considered indispensable. But there is a rule. Don't tell me what I should answer. Ask open-ended questions. Try doing that. Start with that. Join conversations with a very open mind without being predetermined on what the conversation needs to contain. Ask open-ended questions and let the empathy work. As product managers, sometimes we get quite passionate about our toys, our mix panels and our pandos and our graphs and our fancy buzzwords, and we discuss, and sometimes we don't really take into consideration what customer success is saying or what sales is telling us. We consider them trouble sometimes.
They're all stupid anyways, we know the best.
Exactly. We are a little bit uptight when it comes to what needs to be done, and I get it. It is our job to say no, but there is a but here, and this but is that these people are bringing the empathy if we don't have it.
Right.
And the empathy is the best way to be a good product manager, even if you're not very sophisticated about quantitative stuff and data and graphs. And that's the reason that I became that sort of product manager, to be honest, because I don't like hardcore data. I never enjoyed them. I find them complex, inhumane, and they make me sleepy.
Yeah. I mean, it's also like disconnected, right? Like it's not something you experience or you touch. It's like it takes a very different mindset of people to be into that.
Exactly. Yes. There are
Versus
some
if you're
people
into
that
psychotherapy, like that. Psychotherapy, it's a completely different part. It's all qualitative. It's you talking to customers, you understand the customers, you do interviews well, and you're different personalities, like accountant versus a TV host. Like they're quite different folks.
Exactly. In the customer-led approach, we don't only have interviews. We might have surveys. We might have observation. We have other ways of primary research. But we focus mostly on the qualitative part, or what I like saying, the quantification of the qualitative part. Because if I have a question which is, what is it that you want to achieve with my product? This is a qualitative question. But after 10 or 15 interviews, I might have a couple of answers that are consistent. If I take these answers and I make them a drop-down menu, then it becomes a quantitative question. So I quantified a qualitative question. And these are good things to do, mixing qualitative and quantitative tactics for scale or depth to achieve both of them. The quantitative brings you the scale, and the qualitative brings you the why, the depth.
Back to the hybrid. Don't do black and white. Anything in black and white is probably not a good idea.
Exactly.
It's the way to build an Amazon Fire phone that only lasted for, well, not that long.
I've read about another.
Aggelos, I was going to ask you. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I've read about another, the Google glasses. Have you heard of them? Example.
Oh yeah, the first generation.
First generation failed miserably. Second generation was focused on farmers. So they, instead of being a gadget, they made it like a solution for farmers. Nailed it. Boom. They did research. They changed the ICP. Nailed it. The same product, almost the same product.
But it was too geeky for, like, the first generation was just weird. Like for normal people, like you can't, like, who thought it was a great idea? Like it's also the social factor that people are always over-indexing on opinions of other people around them. Because we really care what others think about us. And why would somebody think like, oh, we're just going to put the glasses on, we're going to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger and in a Terminator, and everybody's going to be suddenly okay with it? No, that's just never going to work.
That's true.
Hindsights, of course. Aggelos, I was going to ask you, what were your one or two big breakthrough moments in your career? If you were to go back and think through your career path as a product manager, what were some of the discoveries or things that maybe people you met that actually significantly changed the way that you were doing things before?
Mm-hmm.
You could call them more like a wake-up call moments or some of those.
The first one was when I realized that I'm not talented enough when it comes to the quantitative stuff. I don't enjoy, because it was the time that everybody had to be data-driven. And I was struggling to be data-driven because I never enjoyed opening up my dashboard of graphs and complex correlations and stuff like that. Never enjoyed that a lot. So I had to pick. I had to pick a direction. Were I going to be a qualitative product manager, a quantitative product manager, a growth product manager? I had to decide. So I read my first book on jobs to be done, and that was the first breakthrough. And the second breakthrough was when at some point I knew that, but I realized, then I experienced it firsthand, that most of the problems, 9 out of 10 problems that businesses have, are symptoms, are reflections, are expressions of the real problem. Exactly just like therapy works. When you go to your therapist with depression, it might be your relationship with your mom, your early one. When you go to your therapist because you had a breakup that hurt you, you might realize that this was just a reason that led you there. and there were other things that you had to discuss that were burning inside you. When it comes to churn, what is churn? It's users coming with an expectation and finding a reality that doesn't work for them. That's it. It's a discrepancy between actual value and expected value. What is a marketing problem? Is it a matter of the copy that you're using in your ads? No. Is it a matter of the targeting that you're having? Nobody cares. What matters when your marketing doesn't work is that you are communicating something that does not resonate with the people that see it. So it's a bigger problem. What is it that you communicate? Why? To whom? Have you used any research to drive that? So this was the second breakthrough, and I realized then that I want to be a customer-led product manager, and I want to put qualitative research because I feel, I don't know if this sounds arrogant, and I apologize, I feel that I can solve every problem with qualitative research, or at least find the root of the problem.
No, it doesn't sound arrogant at all to me. I mean, I think companies who over-indexed on customers always did super well. And data, look, I think every company has a ton of folks who are crazy good at data. So they'll give the report to you, you could read it, and that's it. Like I personally don't think a product manager needs to run some crazy Excel formulas, and you don't have to do everything yourself. It's like, what is going to move the actual needle? And a lot of times it's not that like, oh, this is the biggest number we have, let's just double it. Or let's just do something with that number. It's important. You want to look at it, but it's that what you just said, it's talking to customers and understanding what they're trying to say. That's where it becomes quite difficult. And a lot of people don't do it very well. It's the same as interviewing.
Exactly. It needs it's a difficult skill, and that's a difficult thing because I always wanted to scale what I do and perhaps have an agency or something and have people doing it for me, but it's something that it's very hard for me to teach because if it was something that could be put into a recipe, it wouldn't be important. We would hire
That's
people
right.
and they would just follow a script. You cannot have scripted conversations. You need to have both the theoretical background to do it and the speed of thought to do it at this point in time and some experience. So it's an unscalable service. Very, very unscalable, but very useful in the same time.
But the magic is, and I know David Cancel from Drift, CEO of Drift, and I've heard it from other people, is doing this unscalable things is super important because sometimes you figure out how to scale them, but sometimes when you don't figure out how to scale them, it's still beneficial because then you could communicate your value to whoever you're working with and show them exactly why it's unscalable, and that, look, you could go ahead and hire anybody right now on Fiverr or on Upwork, and the truth is they'll be able to do some of that work, like the admin stuff that we do, they could do it, but it's those points of incremental value, those ideas, those insights that you deliver. Sometimes they do 100x of the return, and those are the things that you'll never ever get from those outsourced force. You can do the grunt work, you can do the research, but the actual, like, this is the direction we're going to go. This is where we need another customer interview. Those calls are rarely outsourced.
Yes, and another thing that happens very frequently in my field is that you will either find the product managers that don't know exactly how to do research, or you will find the researchers that don't understand product. So they don't really know how to manage the conversation because they don't really know what this conversation means from a decision-making point of view.
That's right.
This is the difference between what I do and others, and that's a little bragging here, but I just want to explain, I cannot avoid the bragging, is when you do the research, if you also understand what decisions will be made based on what you're listening, then you can manage the conversation in a different way. Because if I'm a researcher and I don't understand that, oh, he's speaking about an integration now, for example, or he's speaking about something that needs 3 weeks of engineering only, but what he says now is like 3 months of engineering. If I don't get that, this is a direct impact on how I'm managing the conversation on a customer-led way.
Because the best interviews are always 100% context-driven. It's the questions that you ask by interpreting the whatever the answer you get in the moment. They're
Exactly.
never, ever, ever prescripted. You're not going to get them in the book. You're not going to get them in jobs to be done. That's just not going to happen. So having that experience allows you to ask a correct contextual question to get to the bottom of 3 weeks development. And that's when you actually get to, hey, this was a productive conversation, versus they give you a clue and you just moved away and went somewhere else because you didn't understand what it meant. So you couldn't connect it back to the actual product, the technical part.
Exactly. And you cannot imagine how pleased customers are when you ask them about their problems and they start speaking and speaking and speaking and they never shut up. Sometimes they don't stop. And you're like, yes, give it to me, baby. That's exactly why I'm here. They love it. They love it.
Go have nuts.
They love it when they speak about their problems. And when you show like genuine interest, and you sometimes we get a little annoying, and that's another tip, by the way. When you're asking like a lot of whys, even sometimes you might be sure you will be sure that, oh, that's exactly what they mean. So I don't need to ask why. I don't need to ask what they mean, because I understand what they mean. This is another mistake. Okay, if you are very experienced, you might do it. It's inevitable that when something is obvious, to save some time, you go to the next question. But technically speaking, you will realize that when you believe that you understand what they mean and what they actually mean, in lots of cases is different. So unless they specifically, explicitly say it, you cannot technically count it as an insight. So sometimes I find myself asking, what do you mean by that? And the customer is like, is he stupid? But I mean, it's impossible that he doesn't understand what I mean. And I'm like, and I apologize. I apologize if my question seems bizarre to you. But can you tell me, what do you mean by, I want to do better? And we both know what he means. but I want to do better.
Totally.
I want to do better is very vague for me. I cannot make any decision with it.
Well, it's that those subtleties that, yes, I've experienced them too. Like, oh my God, like that's just such a dumb conversation. It's all downhill from here, but it's necessary. It's a necessary downhill to then go back up.
Exactly.
Aggelos, it was super fun. Thank you. This was awesome. I love this conversation. I'm sure our audience is going to enjoy too. We're going to work on this, cut it into cool clips, and put it on social media. Thank you for coming. Thank you for sharing your insights. This was tremendous.
It was a great conversation for me as well. Thank you very much. And I hope it is helpful for people that will listen to it.
Thank you guys for listening. This was another episode of Product Innovation Show with Aggelos. We will post the links, post everything soon for you. Thank you for following us, subscribing. We're going to be back with another great product person. Thanks.